I settled into my seat in the Grand Assembly Hall and immediately regretted not stopping for coffee. The hall was enormous, a sweeping dome of pale blue crystal that caught light from 17 different star systems simultaneously, or so the architectural brochure claimed. Delegates from 43 species filled the curved rows of seats around me. Their various limbs, appendages, and sensory organs all pointed toward the central platform. I was the only human in the room. I was used to that by now. My name is Dr. Mara Voss. I had been working with the Galactic Biological Classification Bureau for 8 months, serving as Earth's first scientific representative in the Grand Genomic Census. My job, in simple terms, was to make sure humanity's biological data was submitted correctly and to attend various ceremonies where that data would be formally acknowledged. It was, by most measures, a prestigious but quiet assignment. I spent most of my days reviewing spreadsheets and trying to figure out which alien beverages would not dissolve my stomach lining. The Grand Genomic Census was the Bureau's most ambitious project in 400 years. Every species in the Galactic Union had submitted biological samples. The Bureau's team of xenogeneticists spent 2 years analyzing them, mapping genomes, and assigning each species a ranking on the predator-prey spectrum, a scale from 1 to 10 that classified where each species fell in terms of biological predator capability. It was purely scientific, everyone insisted. No political implications whatsoever. I had submitted Earth sample 8 months ago, and genuinely stopped thinking about it. Ambassador Thal appeared beside me as I sat down. He was a tall, silver-skinned Velhari, with 4 arms, and an expression I had come to recognize as controlled anxiety. He greeted me quietly, and sat down closer to me than usual. "Big day," I said. "Yes," he said, not looking at me. "You seem tense." "I am perfectly calm," he said, in the tone of someone who was absolutely not calm. I looked around the hall. Something was different. The usual pre-ceremony chatter was missing. Delegates who typically waved at me, or made their species equivalent of a friendly gesture, were looking away. A cluster of Keth delegates, large, gray-armored beings who resembled armored rhinoceroses and were widely regarded as the most physically imposing species in the Union, had moved their seats 2 rows further from me than they had been during the pre-session gathering. "Thal," I said quietly, "why is everyone sitting further away from me than usual?" "I don't believe that is the case." The Keth moved. He paused for a moment. Perhaps they wanted a better view. Before I could respond, I noticed the transparent barrier. It was a thin panel, barely visible, installed along the edge of the observation section where I was seated. It had not been there yesterday. I had walked through this hall a dozen times, and there had never been a barrier along this row. "When was that installed?" I asked, pointing to it. Thal cleared his throat. "Recently." "How recently?" "Within the last 6 hours." I stared at him. He continued looking forward at the central platform with the focused attention of someone desperately hoping the ceremony would start immediately. It did, shortly after that. Analyst Prime Serath took the platform, a small, pale being, with 6 fingers on each hand, and the calm, measured voice of someone who had been delivering scientific conclusions for decades. He welcomed the assembly, acknowledged the years of work behind the census, and began presenting results in ascending order of predator ranking. I watched the rankings roll in. Species I had read about, studied, and in some cases shared meals with, received their classifications one by one. A PPS 3 here, a PPS 5 there. The Duvari, known for their razor-edge tail fins and lightning-fast reflexes, came in at PPS 6. The crowd received each announcement with polite acknowledgement. Then the Keth were called. The gray-armored delegates straightened in their seats. Serath read the classification clearly. Predator-prey spectrum level 7. The hall responded with genuine murmurs of respect. PPS 7 was exceptional. The Keth were the highest-ranked species in Union history. Several delegates looked at the Keth section with visible admiration, or something that served the same purpose in their biology. I was thinking about whether the cafeteria would still be open after the ceremony, when Serath paused. It was not a normal pause. It was the kind of pause that made the room go still. He looked down at his data panel, then back at the assembly. He said that one species had returned results that required a special classification. The genomic data had been reviewed multiple times by 3 independent teams. The behavioral assessment submitted at the start of the census had placed this species at PPS3. The genomic data did not support that classification. He said the corrected ranking was PPS12. I had no idea what that meant, so I leaned over and asked Thal quietly. He said, barely above a whisper, that the scale only went to 10. I sat with that for a moment. I asked which species had triggered the reclassification. I assumed it was the Vorkai, a deep ocean species with 17 rows of teeth and a biological history that read like a list of nightmares. They seemed like obvious candidates. Thal turned to look at me for the first time since the ceremony began. His silver skin had taken on a slightly paler tone. He said, "It is your species, Dr. Voss." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" Sareth's voice carried across the silent hall. "Homo sapiens, Terran system, Sol 3. The noise that followed was unlike anything I had ever heard in a formal session. It was not shouting. It was something closer to the sound of 43 species collectively deciding they needed to reassess a situation. Chairs shifted, bodies moved. 3 delegates near the back of the hall stood up entirely. I sat very still. Sareth waited for the room to quiet, then continued with the detail report. A younger researcher named Velorin joined him at the platform, visibly pale, though I only learned later that he had fainted when he first saw the full results, and had been cleared by the medical team to present only after 2 hours of recovery. What they described was this. Every species in the census showed genomic optimization for a specific biological role. Predators were built for one thing: speed, or strength, or chemical attack, or coordinated hunting. Even the highest-ranked species showed clear specialization. Biology, across the known galaxy, worked through trade-offs. You developed one capability at the cost of another. That was how evolution worked. That was how it had always worked. Human DNA did not follow this rule. Our genome showed optimization markers for persistence hunting, the ability to track and chase prey across enormous distances until it collapsed from exhaustion, a strategy so physically demanding that almost no other species had developed it, because almost no other species could survive the energy cost. We were built for it at a cellular level. We also carried full genomic markers for cooperative ambush hunting, coordination, patience, strategic timing as a biological trait, wired into social behavior at a genetic level. Our gut was classified as an advanced omnivore system, capable of processing toxins that would be immediately lethal to most predator species. We could eat things that other hunters could not eat and survive. Our thermoregulation, the system that keeps our body temperature stable, was, by galactic standards, extraordinary. We could sustain physical exertion in heat conditions that would cause most species to shut down within minutes. We sweated. No other species in the census used evaporative cooling at the same efficiency. We were, in thermal terms, virtually unstoppable in warm environments. And then, Velorin got to the part that had caused him to faint. Buried in the sections of human DNA that biology textbooks used to call junk, sequences considered inactive and irrelevant, the Bureau's analysts had found something intact, not vestigial, not degraded, intact, complete genetic instructions for bilateral chemical delivery organs, venom glands, more complex and more versatile than any venom system documented in the known galaxy, with a molecular structure suggesting the potential to produce multiple distinct compounds targeting different biological systems. The instructions were not broken. They were not erased. They were paused. The hall was completely silent. A council member asked Velorin directly what that meant. He said it meant that at some point in human evolutionary history, we had possessed a venom delivery system, and that evolution had not removed it the way it removed unnecessary traits. It had stored it. The blueprint was still there, complete, waiting. Someone in the back of the hall made a sound I did not have a translation for. 3 council members spoke at once. One called for an immediate review of Earth's membership standing. One requested that the transparent barrier be upgraded. One asked me, directly, across the chamber floor, why humans suppress these capabilities in daily life. I stood up. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because I think it matters. I did not feel afraid. I did not feel defensive. I felt something I did not immediately have a word for, something quiet and deep that had been sitting still inside me the whole session and had just shifted slightly, like an old door settling on its hinges. I told them that I appreciated the thoroughness of the analysis. I told them that the data was correct, to the best of my knowledge, and that I was not in a position to dispute the genomic findings of 3 independent research teams. Then I told them what humans did with the Predator toolkit. The persistence hunting became science. When we no longer needed to chase prey across distances, we turned that same relentless biological drive toward problems, toward disease, toward physics, toward mathematics that took generations to solve. The human capacity to keep moving toward a target, past exhaustion, past pain, past the point where any reasonable creature would stop, we redirected it at the universe itself. The cooperative ambush coordination became engineering. It became surgical teams and space programs, and the construction of things so large and complex that no single human could understand them fully, only the group. The same wiring that once made us dangerous in the dark made us capable of building in ways that required thousands of minds working with precise timing. The omnivore gut that could process toxins became pharmacology. We spent centuries deliberately consuming things that should have killed us, learning which ones healed instead, until we built an entire science around the boundary between poison and medicine. The thermoregulation that let us run in lethal heat became exploration. We went to the places no other creature could survive long enough to understand. We mapped deserts and ocean floors, and eventually the space between stars, because our biology allowed us to endure long enough to look around. And the venom blueprint, still folded quietly in the unused sections of our genome, that became chemistry. That became the study of molecular structure and biological mechanisms, taken apart and understood, and then deliberately used to reduce suffering instead of cause it. I paused for a moment before I said the last part. I told them that there was one finding in the report I wanted to address directly: the psychological data, the part noting that humans were documented acting in direct opposition to their own fear response, continuing to advance toward threats that triggered full biological terror, not once, not in isolated cases, but repeatedly, across our entire recorded history. I told them that was not a malfunction. That was the part we were most proud of. Every firefighter who went into a burning building while every nerve in their body screamed to run. Every doctor who walked into a room full of a disease that had no cure yet. Every person who had ever been terrified and kept going anyway, not because they felt no fear, but because they decided the thing they were moving toward mattered more than the fear. That, I told them, was what we did with the Predator in our genome. We did not remove it. We did not suppress it. We aimed it at things worth hunting, at ignorance, at suffering, at the distance between where we were and where we wanted to be. The hall was quiet for a long time after that. Sarath looked at his panel. He made a notation. He announced, in his calm and measured voice, that Homo sapiens would be formally reclassified in the census record. The Predator ranking would remain at PPS 12. The behavioral classification would be updated from Class 3 docile omnivore to something the translation system rendered as active, redirected. I sat back down. Thal did not say anything. After a moment, he placed one of his 4 hands briefly on my arm, which I had learned was a significant gesture for a Velhari. Then he looked back at the platform. The ceremony concluded shortly after. As delegates filed out, the space around me was considerably quieter than usual. The Keth did not walk near my row. Several species took the long way around the exit. I noticed all of this, and found that I did not mind. Thal walked me to the transport corridor. I asked him about the barrier, what it had actually been for. He was quiet for a moment, then told me the truth. It had not been installed to contain me. It had been installed so the other delegates would feel safe enough to stay in the room. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed all day, and it surprised me a little. On the transport home, I sat alone and looked out at the stars. I looked at my hands, ordinary hands, the kind that typed reports and held coffee cups, and occasionally forgot to close cabinet doors. Nothing about them looked dangerous. Nothing about them had ever looked dangerous. But somewhere in the long, patient code written inside every cell of these ordinary hands, something ancient was still folded up and waiting. Not gone, not broken, Just stored. The way you store something, you worked very hard to build and cannot quite bring yourself to throw away. I looked at the stars for a long time after that. They looked the same as always. I was not entirely sure that I did.